Put forward by Deputy Donegan. It's the need to clarify the position in relation to the GMS contract and the provision of free blood tests for medical card patients and GP visit card holders. The Deputy has 5 minutes.
Thank you, Las Ceann Comhairle, and I'd like to start by thanking the Ceann Comhairle's office for giving me the opportunity to raise this issue today, and I'd also like to thank Minister Shortall for taking this adjournment. The charging of medical card holders for blood tests is something that was raised with me just after the general election in February. A couple were asked by their GP to pay for a blood test even though they were in possession of a valid medical card, and of course they paid because they were worried about their health, and they felt that failure to pay would mean failure to have a test, and would mean perhaps that their illness would go undiagnosed or untreated. So they were confused and they decided to pay, and of course they would. But they did worry about how they could afford it, and they did worry about whether or not this was just the start of a creeping system whereby they were going to pay for more and more services whilst being in possession at the same time of a medical card. And I know that they weren't the only couple. Other people have contacted me across County Meath, and I believe it's also common in other counties as well, whereby GPs are charging people for taking blood even though those people have got medical cards. Now, at the moment, 1 in every 3 people in the country have a medical card or a GP card. This number has been increasing since the start of the recession, and the HSE own figures suggest that by the end of this year, up to 40% of the population will be in receipt of a medical card. And the overall cost of the GMS scheme to the Exchequer is just under £2 billion in 2009. The total payments to GPs under the scheme are about €500 million every year. 2,100 GPs are in receipt of a GMS contract, and the average payment to each of them is about €225,000 a year. Now, payments vary across the country, but of course on top of those payments, GPs are also entitled to take on private clients. So typically the total payments going into a GP's practice could be in the order of €400,000–500,000 a year. Now, I know that there was a reduction, an 8% cut in payment a couple of years ago, and I know that the Irish Medical Organisation is arguing that that's making things more difficult for GPs to provide services, but not one GP has opted out of the GMS contract. So clearly it's not that difficult to cater for the 8% cut. And in my view, I think it's intolerable that GPs are asking vulnerable people to pay for a blood test charge. And I think it's not fair that they're doing this. I think it's a direct attack on poorer people. So personally, I'm disgusted that any doctor would do this. I'm glad to see the Minister here. I think we do need to see clarity in this whole issue. So I'm asking the Minister what the situation is. Can she clarify if GPs have the right to charge people for blood tests, people who have got medical cards? What can they charge for? And will the Minister be issuing any guidance in relation to this so that we can clear up this matter once and for all? Gurmagat.
Minister Ara.
I want to start by thanking Deputy Hannigan for raising this matter. I know it's an issue that he's been concerned about for some time. He first raised it with me just shortly after being elected to this House, and I'm glad now to have the opportunity to provide clarification on the matter. I'd also say that a number of other deputies have raised it with PQs as well, so it's important that we get this clarification. Under the General Medical Services contract, a general practitioner is expected to provide his or her patients who hold a medical card or a GP visit card with all proper and necessary treatment of a kind generally undertaken by a GP. Where blood tests form part of the investigation and necessary treatment of patients' symptoms or conditions, these should be provided free of charge to medical card and GP visit card holders. The HSE also points out that in many GP surgeries, it is the practice nurse who takes the blood samples. The HSE significantly subsidises the cost of employing practice nurses. In fact, last year, the Executive provided €39 million in allowances to GMS GPs in this regard. There are almost 2,300 GPs contracted by the HSE to provide GP services under the GMS scheme to over 1.6 million medical card holders and 120,000 GP visit card holders. As Deputy Hannigan has already pointed out, GPs within the GMS receive payments up to about €500 million in this regard. The HSE has recently reported to my department that it has received approximately 30 formal complaints from GMS patients regarding GPs charging for blood tests, and there have also been a significant number of queries to the HSE's National Information Line about this issue. Formal complaints will be dealt with through the HSE's Consumer Affairs Service. The GMS contract prohibits GPs seeking or accepting payment from patients for the provision of services under the contract. I am disappointed that a minority of GPs have disregarded this provision and have chosen to charge patients whom the state has deemed to be unable to meet the cost of medical services. As Deputy Hannigan has said, these are the most vulnerable people. At my request, the HSE has recently written to all GMS GPs, reminding them of their obligations under their contract. I will be monitoring the situation closely to ensure that this unacceptable practice is brought to an end. In the meantime, public patients should contact the HSE if they believe they are being wrongly charged for services by their GP, and the matter will be appropriately investigated. I know Deputy Hannigan has already brought this to my attention, and I fully appreciate that because of the nature of the GP-patient relationship, it may be difficult for patients to make such complaints. Where public representatives are made aware of GPs charging GMS patients for blood tests, they may wish to notify the HSE directly. I want to thank the Deputy for raising this matter, and I want to assure him of my determination to address the issue and bring an end to this practice.